Good afternoon, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you again for joining me. I'm here to share some news with you. The animosity, the conflict between the border of Tigray and Amara region is still active, no ending sight. So the conflict continue in that area. Uh, there is also a conflict between the federal authorities and those in Amara region, especially the Fano and Amara militia, who want to continue the war deep into the Tigray region, and the federal government also, at least in a public face, want to stop, even though the air bombardment continue. Also, there is a document, a secret document circulating on the news. The federal government, the Prosperity Party, intention to disarm the heavily armed Fano and Amara militia. So there is huge news at this time, especially in the Amara region, against the federal government, against the Abiy administration. So they consider it as a plot against Fano to disarm them, to disarm the Amara militia. So this is a very serious discussion on the social media. I don't have that document. I don't have much detail, but it's a secret document. According to Prosperity Party, is not supposed to be released to anybody. Done is a secret meeting, but it's now is out in social media. 360 has it, and others talking about it. So it's a huge topic at this time. So if I got that topic, if I got that document, I might share more with you, but I don't have much. The other thing is in 2021 African Cup of Nations, Ethiopia lost to Cameroon 4-1. So it's nothing good news for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. So thank you for joining me. And January the 14th, 2022. So I have some news to read, then a couple of videos to share at the end. Thank you again. The first one is from United Nations. It says United Nations alarmed by Ethiopia's airstrike in Tigray, killing 108, injuring more than 75 civilians since the year began. Spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Liz Throssell, in a press briefing today, sounded alarm at the targeting of civilians and the destruction of civilians' projects in Tigray region. The spokesperson called on the federal government and its allies to respect international laws and ensure the protection of civilians, and warned that such actions would mount to war crimes. Moreover, the spokesperson sounded alarm at the continued crackdown under the auspices of the state of emergency, without due process. The following is full statement from UN. We are alarmed by the multiple deeply disturbing reports we continue to receive of civilian casualties and the destruction of civilian objects resulting from airstrikes in Ethiopia's Tigray region. At least 108 civilians have been reportedly been killed and 75 others injured since the year began as a result of airstrikes alleged carried out by the Ethiopian Air Force. On Wednesday this week, an airstrike claimed the life of a 72-year-old man. The previous day, on 11 January, the state-owned Technical Vocational Education and Training Institute was hit, reportedly killing 3 men and leaving 21 people injured, most of them women. On Wednesday this week, and on Monday, 10 January, 17 civilians were reportedly killed and 21 injured, most of them women, after an airstrike reportedly carried out by a drone hit a flour mill where they had gathered to grind their grains into flour. The deadliest airstrike so far, which hit the Deadbeat IDP camp on 7 January, left at least 56 people dead and 30 others wounded. We have since established that 3 of those who were critically injured later died in hospital while receiving medical treatment, pushing the death toll from the single strike to at least 59. Numerous other airstrikes were reported last week, hitting a private minibus traveling from Adet to Aksum City, Shire Airport, Mayani refugee camp, and other areas. We call on the Ethiopian authorities and their allies to ensure the protection of civilians and civilian objects in line with the obligation under international law. Any attack, including airstrikes, should fully respect the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in attack. In particular, parties to the conflict must take all feasible measures to verify that targets are indeed military objects and suspended an attack if it is become apparent that the target is not a military objective or that the attack would be disproportionate. Failure to respect the principles of distinction and proportionality could amount to war crimes. We are all concerned by the continued arbitrary arrests and detention amid the state of emergency. While we welcome the recent release of several high-profile individuals, including key opposition figures who had been in detention for many months, we remain concerned that many more people, at least hundreds, remain indefinitely detained in appalling conditions and without being brought before a court of law or other tribunal to review the reasons for their detention, among other violation of procedural guarantees. So that's the UN United Nations report on the situation in Ethiopia, especially on the airstrike and the arbitrary detention of individuals, ethnic-based detention. Tigrayans and Oromos, mostly in thousands, not hundreds, thousands and thousands. And it's a war crime. I don't know where. It's already a war crime happening in Ethiopia, but the United Nations so far uh, didn't take any credible action against Ethiopia. So many evidence reported. Okay. This one about Ethiopia accusing World Health Organization chief of link with TPLF. Ethiopia demands that the World Health Organization, WHO, investigate its leader for supporting rebellious forces fighting the Ethiopian government, the foreign ministry said. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who previously served as the Ethiopian Health Minister and the Foreign Minister, said earlier this week that aid was being blocked from getting through to his home region of Tigray, where rebellious forces are fighting the central government. Tedros Adhanom's moral, legal, and professional standing that threatened WHO organizational standing, Ethiopia said in a statement late on Thursday. He has spread harmful misinformation and compromised WHO's reputation, independence, credibility, which is evident from his social media posts. The WHO didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Ethiopia's army chief has previously accused Tedros of trying to procure arms and diplomatic backing for the rebellious forces of the Tigray People Liberation Front, TPLF. He denied that. The United Nations says the government is operating a de facto blockade of humanitarian aid to Tigray. No trucks have entered the region since December 15. More than 90% of the population needs food aid, and the doctors told Reuters last week that many people, including malnutrition children, are dying because no medicine has been permitted to enter Tigray. On Thursday, Tedros tweeted, people in hashtag Tigray, hashtag Ethiopia, living under a de facto blockade for over a year, are dying from a lack of medicine and food and repeated drone attacks at WHO and partners call for safe, unimpeded access to deliver humanitarian aid to the millions of people in the great need. The government has denied blocking aid and accused the TPLF of requisitioning trucks sent in previously. Ethiopia's foreign ministry said Tedros failed to show integrity and professionalism and was a member of the TPLF, which dominated Ethiopia politics for nearly 30 years before Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed 2018 appointment. Tedros encourages the TPLF in his media engagement and celebrates what is presumed to be a military success of the group, besides engaging in a selective outrage where he discriminately addressed the humanitarian concerns in Ethiopia, the ministry said. The government designated TPLF a terrorist group after the war erupted in November 2020. Tedros, a Tigrayan, was a member of the TPLF. Abiy also served as an intelligence chief under the previous TPLF-led government. The latest criticism follows two difficult years for Tedros as he led the world through a global pandemic and faced attacks from former US President Donald Trump, who withheld WHO funding over accusation Tedros didn't sufficiently challenge China over the origin of COVID-19. Tedros was elected the World uh, the World Health Organization's first African Director General in May 2017 with a strong Ethiopian and African support. He ran again as the sole nominee in October. Ethiopia withheld its support, and 28 other countries appointed Tedros for a second 5-year term. So that's repeated accusation about uh, WHO Director Dr. Tedros Adhanom, and they're calling on World Health Organization to investigate to investigate him. Maybe they want him to fire. They want the organization to fire him. That is the target. They're gonna get it? I don't think so. All he said is alarming, exposing what is happening in Tigray. Tigray is in a blockade. It's clearly. So many other international organizations already reported on that one. But Ethiopia is keep denying, now is blaming World Health Organization. But they will not be successful. I hope they will be accountable for that one day in the future. This is from Nobel Peace Awarding Committee, and calling on Abiy Ahmed to end the conflict. Ethiopia Prime Minister must end Tigray conflict, Nobel Committee says. Oslo. The committee that awards the Nobel Peace Prize appealed on Thursday to Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, who won the award in 2019, to halt the conflict unfolding in the country's northern region of Tigray. In a rare critique of a former laureate, the Norwegian Nobel Committee said Abiy bore special responsibility for bringing to an end the fighting that broke out in late 2020. The committee generally refrain from commenting the actions of Nobel Prize winners after they have won the award. An exception has been Abiy, with the committee having previously expressed its deep concern about the conflict. In the past week, airstrikes killed at least 73 civilians in Tigray, aid workers said. The humanitarian situation is dire, and it is unacceptable that humanitarian aid is not getting through in a sufficient manner, Nobel Committee Chair Berit Reis Anderson said in a statement. As a Prime Minister and a Peace Prize laureate, Abiy Ahmed has a special responsibility to end the conflict and contribute to making peace. The government has previously denied targeting civilians in the 14-month-old conflict, which pits Abiy's federal forces and their regional allies backed by Eritrea against rebellion forces of the Tigray People Liberation Front TPLF. Abiy won the Nobel Prize a year after taking office to resolving 2 decades of hostility with neighboring Eritrea, also an arch enemy of the TPLF, which dominated Ethiopia's government until Abiy came to power. Both sides blame each other for the current conflict. The TPLF accuses Abiy of centralizing power at the expense of the region, which he denies, while Abiy accuses the TPLF of seeking to return to power at the national level, which it rejected. Credit Reuters. So that is a report or a demand by Nobel Committee, Nobel Awarding Committee on Abiy Ahmed to end the conflict. But according to their rules, they don't have the power to take down the Nobel Prize once they award. That's why they are hesitant to criticize, hesitant to demand that it should be in place. If somebody is recognized, then if he did something bad, something inhuman, genocide, crime, there should be an option to remove the Nobel Prize, the recognition. Now they rush to recognize this guy, Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia. Now he took the country in a deep crisis, and war crime, genocide, and all kind of inhumane treatment is happening in Ethiopia. So they should have put in place the option to take the Nobel Prize away, but now they don't have that rule, so they have to stick with it. So thank you. That's the reading part, and let's see a couple of videos and end today's presentation. There we go. The first one is from United States about voting rights.
Delight to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Texas, my friend, and another member who stays in perpetual motion, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a member of the Judiciary Committee, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
To the distinguished leader of this debate, Mr. Butterfield, for your service to this nation, I am grateful. This is a somber, sacred moment in our lives on this floor. I stand here in the name of the blood shed by those foot soldiers, Dr. Martin Luther King and John Robert Lewis, who shed his blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. My friends who vote no today will disregard and ignore that bloodshed. I refuse to ignore the blood that was shed for the right to vote. As a member of the House Judiciary Committee, this committee built over the course of 13 hearings in 2 Congresses, led by Jerry Nadler and Steve Cohen, the record for the John Robert Lewis bill. And for that, I am grateful, for I stand as a victim of the lack of preclearance. The bills that we have will eliminate a legislature, as Texas bill states, to overturn duly voters' choice. It will prevent the purging of voters, which happens all the time. It will protect you at the polls, and it will disallow people from interfering with your vote. It is now a sacred honor and charge. We must vote now in the name of Martin King and John Robert Lewis. We cannot do any less. The Senate must do its job. I yield back.
Hope. Where are you hiding?
Well, another attempt at diffusing the tensions between the West and Russia have failed. The third round of talks in Vienna this week has ended in deadlock. Here are the details.
It seems that the risk of war in the OEC area is now greater than ever before in the last 30 years.
At a security meeting of 57 nations in Vienna on Thursday, Poland's foreign minister said Europe was closer to war than any time in the last 3 decades, as Russia said diplomatic efforts to diffuse tensions over Ukraine were hitting a dead end. After the meeting, the U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe said the West should prepare for a possible escalation in tensions with Moscow, adding, quote, "The drumbeat of war is sounding loud." Meanwhile, Russian snipers took part in military exercises near the Ukrainian border on Thursday, following tank drills the day prior. Russia denies planning to invade Ukraine, but says it needs guarantees from the West for its own security, including barring Ukraine from joining NATO and rolling back decades of alliance expansion in Europe, demands the U.S. has called non-starters. In an interview on Russian television, the country's deputy foreign minister said diplomacy must be given a chance, but that Russian military specialists were providing options to President Vladimir Putin in case the situation worsened.
We can no longer retreat. We can already see that there will be other measures, other actions against our opponents if they don't take into account our demands and our needs in the end.
Later on Thursday, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said at a White House press briefing that the U.S. was ready to respond to any Russian aggression.
The United States and our allies and partners are prepared for any contingency, any eventuality. We're prepared to keep moving forward down the diplomatic path in good faith, and we're prepared to respond if Russia acts. And beyond that, all we can do is get ready, and we are ready.
Russia has said it will decide on its next moves after this week's talks, but the pessimism from Russian officials casts grave doubt on the chances of a diplomatic breakthrough at one of the most fraught moments in East-West relations since the Cold War.
Okay, one more short video.
So-called resistance committees in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, have led the calls for peaceful protests to continue. And on Thursday, supporters were back on the streets. They chant against the military, which took over power in October last year, bringing an end to a two-year transitional government.
Admire the
UN mission in
of
Sudan
these people,
launched
the
an
Sudanese
initiative
people.
earlier this week in an attempt to break the country's political
They have
deadlock.
been on the
It wants
streets
to get political
for a
parties,
long,
associations,
almost a year
civil
now.
society groups, and the military round a table to discuss the way forward. But the response has so far not been good.
We reject the UN initiative that sets the path for a base of compromise and negotiation with the military, which we refuse to have in power because they came up through a coup. The military should be removed from power, and then we'll reach out to the various parties and come up with a way to form a complete civilian government. But for now, we cannot negotiate with the military.
A deal in November between the military and Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok failed to appease political parties or the protest movement. Hamdok eventually resigned earlier this month. Resistance committees set up in residential neighborhoods have been organizing protests on an almost daily basis against military rule.
We want a complete civilian rule. That's been the goal of this revolution since 2019. For 30 years, people have been living under an oppressive state, and the revolution that started was for a civilian government. We want the army out.
In this latest protest, tear gas and stun grenades were fired. The use of live ammunition by security forces was also reported. At least 2 deaths were reported, including the death of a senior police officer. Medics say several protesters were also injured. Protest organizers say they'll only sit down to discuss Sudan's future when the military leaves the political scene and is off the streets. They appear united, in stark contrast to political parties, which are divided on whether to accept the UN effort aimed at ending the deadlock or reject it. Several parties have called it a move to legitimize the military takeover. Others say they'll need more consultations before deciding.
We're currently talking as a political coalition. We don't want to go back to square one or to the situation before the military coup. We have clear goals that need to be achieved, which is having a civilian government for Sudan's transition, and the return of the military and security forces to their normal positions, just like other security forces in the world.
The violence seen in this latest protest and death of a senior security official could delay any further diplomatic attempts to end the crisis. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Khartoum.
Okay, that's the last one for today. Thank you for sharing your time with me. and are really encouraged by the determination of the Sudanese people for betterment of their country. They're challenging the coup, and they are calling for, for the civilian administration. And we are missing, as I said before, we are missing such kind of determination in Ethiopia. Ethiopians, they are just clapping their hand for the prime minister taking the country into further catastrophe, bloodshed, economic downturn, international isolation. What our people doing? They keep clamming and being silent, except some. The diaspora, they are doing a good job in raising the issue to the global stage, calling for justice, freedom in that country. But those who are living back home, they are fighting each other. And instead of come together and the challenge on the prime minister, your policy is not working. Your leadership is a failure. You need to resign. They're supposed to demand. What they doing? Instead of demanding their basic rights, they are fighting each other, killing each other, hating each other, detesting each other, disrespecting each other. That's what they're doing. So I appreciate Sudanese. I hope they will have a better system after all these deaths and the destruction, after all this suffering. I hope so. And I hope the tension between the West and the East also be resolved in a peaceful manner, especially with the situation in Ukraine. Ukraine, I think they might, go to war with Russia. And then, as you heard, the United States, the European Union might join. So if this thing is not resolved, we might go to the third world conflict, third world war. So I hope they will resolve it in a peaceful manner, and the Ukraine must play its part too, instead of aggravating Russia, poking on the eyes, and pushing Russia to bring all this military and hardware to the border areas. So that's all I have for today. Thank you. I will be back with other news and updates. So long and be safe.